welcome everybody. My name is Josh. I am the Vice Chair of the Maryland Republican Jewish Council. We are co-hosting this event today, the CRT webinar panel, along with the Maryland Black Republican Council. And I'd like to first start out with some introductions. Like I said, I am the Vice Chair of the Maryland Republican Jewish Council. I'm also a former soldier in the Israeli Army of the IDF, and I'm a political activist here in Maryland. Why don't we start out with Torrey and we'll work our way around.
Sure. I'm Torrey Snow, president of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of Maryland, also host on WBAL from 2 to 6 p.m. every weekday, so tune in. But no, I'm really excited to be here. The Frederick Douglass Foundation has been doing a lot of work trying to help craft and clarify and build partnerships around narratives that are important for our community, and anyone that works with us knows that we always put our communities first. So we're gonna keep pushing on that. Thanks for having me.
Certainly. Pastor Wright, would you mind going next?
Sure. My name is, what is my name today? Oh, yeah, Pastor Wright. It's been a long year and it's only the 4th. Sorry about that. All jokes aside, my name is Pastor Shannon Wright. I live in Baltimore. I am a Black conservative Christian Republican woman in Baltimore, which makes me a bit of a unicorn, and I love it. We are working at stirring up pots and making noise in the city, getting folks to understand that we seem to have strayed from our traditional principles and beliefs, and that's kind of where we have gone astray, and we're trying to reel folk back in and get them going in the right direction.
I'd also just like to give a quick shout out to Pastor Wright. She was a last minute addition. One of our other panelists we did secure was unable to make it due to some family obligations. So thank you once again for accommodating us. We really do appreciate it.
This is an important conversation. Thank you.
Yes, it is. Dr. Thiam, would you mind going next?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It's a joy to be with you all, starting off the new year with hot topics like critical race theory. My name is Brenda J, just so you know, Josh.
I apologize.
I correct you politely. That's fine. You're using those grand kindergarten phonetic spelling skills. So yes, my name is Brenda J, and I represent District 2B, which is here in Hagerstown. And I'm, again, just glad to be with you all this evening.
All right. And I see Larry's coming in and out, and hopefully if he does connect, we'll be able to plug him in here. If not, I see that we do have, we're honored to have Nicole here as well. If Nicole wouldn't mind just introducing herself and we'll get started.
Herself, all of me? Okay, no, all of the hats that I wear, right? My name is Nicole Bennet. I'm the first vice chairman of Maryland Republican Party. I am also the chairman of the Black Republican Council, and full disclosure, a board member with the Maryland Republican Jewish Council.
All right.
And the Frederick Douglass Foundation.
Oops, I forgot. And the Frederick Douglass Foundation.
All those hats, all of yourselves.
Right, and that's all of myself.
That was an intentional Freudian slip, okay? Come on. So the first question I want to dive into, and feel free to answer as you will. Not everybody has the same answers to everything. We're not going in any particular order. We don't need to raise our hands. We're all adults here, I hope. So what is CRT? We hear a lot of different things from the media, from the left and the right. The right's turned into this rallying call, using it to campaign on, which is great. We believe that's part of why Virginia flipped. But at the same time, the left is saying CRT is this racist dog whistle. The right's just saying CRT so they don't have to talk about slavery or segregation or this or that. And I really want to dive into the nuts and bolts of what actually is it, instead of how can we use it to make ourselves look good.
Sure, I'll jump in and start, because I like one of my favorite definitions of this term. It is exactly what it says: critical race theory. And if you deconstruct those words, it is a theory that, taking a critical view of race and its role in our society, is important for making a society more equal. one of the things about CRT as a concept is I actually really enjoy it as an academic theoretical concept. It is a really fun thing to go back through American history and ask the question, did race play a role in different aspects of our society? In its modern practical application, however, it has been translated from theory to dogma, and it is the assumption that the theory that race has an impact on everything is the reason that we have so many problems in our communities. And so it really turns into a framework, right? A collection of ideas and presumptions about the United States that are frankly unverified. The 1619 Project is often used as a source for this, and some of it's true, some of it's not. And I think that that gives the debate the power that it does, is because so much of it is ambiguously defined. It can really mean whatever you want it to mean, depending on who you're talking to and what you want them to believe.
Of course.
I like the way you said that, because critical race theory, first of all, when I first started hearing critical race theory, it made me scratch my head. And I was like, okay, I'm a little confused. This is a theory by which folk that don't look like me want to teach me what they did to folk that look like me. So I hear you. But the reality is, if you are Black now, you probably were born Black. Just saying, probably. Therefore, you probably have a wealth of generational experience on being Black and about things that happen to other Black folk that you are genetically connected to, not read on Wikipedia. So it seems to me that if, you know, and this is a new year and I'm hitting a milestone year this year. So my grandmama said, don't sugarcoat nothing. This is a theory for folks that can't understand and wrap their brain around. Folk in their family might have done a couple generations back to make them feel better about the stuff they thought they said they did. Now, that is all cute. That's what happened then. But the question really needs to be, if you want to have a theory to feel good, better about whatever, once you have a theory, when you look at scientific things, you have a thought, you have a theory, and then you have a body of work or steps you take based on that theory. So if folk really believe that racism is embedded and it's the reason for all these different things and that, what you gonna do about it? So to me, we all know where we've been. If you are Black, if you are green, if you are purple, if you are blue, you have had somebody look at you for being other than they are and have something to say about it. So the question isn't the differences in how we sugarcoat the differences. The question is recognizing we are all individuals. We all have a different racial and cultural and religious perspective. Now, how do we do what our forefathers wanted us to do, which is become a big melting pot and move forward?
So if I may, Joshua, Torrey, I appreciate your very PhD definition of critical race theory. a lot of big words thrown around there that I know we can all wrap our brains around. But I tell you what, I'm a very literal and concrete thinker. And when I'll be honest with you, I'd never heard of critical race theory until most recently in the last couple of years. And when I started doing a little digging and I came across a few books that people had recommended me to read more about it and looking at websites, I came across a book, Black Eye for America, that was written by Dr. Carol Swain and another author, Dr. Christopher Shore. I thought, okay, I've got to wrap my brain around this whole theory. You know, when you hear theory, theory is just that. It's thoughts and ideas. So for me, CRT is very plainly put, according to some of the material in her book, race supplants class. It talks about white people being the oppressors and Blacks being the oppressed or other marginalized communities. It talks about African Americans aren't able to think for themselves or always feeling victimized. It talks about white Americans feeling superior. The word white supremacist was tossed around quite a bit in this book. So for me, that's how I wrap my brain around this whole critical race theory, which in turn flies in the face of American values and what we stand for and what our Constitution stands for when our forefathers wrote it. CRT flies in the face of what being American is all about. My mom always taught me in my, it was 5 of us growing up, single mom, work hard for what you want. Don't make excuses and stop blaming your teachers. My teacher doesn't like me. I used to always say that. I remember growing up as a kid. Miss Jones doesn't like me because I'm Black. My mother used to say, you being Black don't have nothing to do with why you not passing math.
Yep.
Nothing. I see you at home. You don't do your homework. I have to be behind you, but doing your homework. So that's where those excuses have just got to kind of be tossed out of the window. But with CRT, it pulls in those excuses for brown and Black people to kind of hang their hat on. It's because of this reason a white man won't let me advance because I'm Black.
I'd like to build on that really quick, if you guys don't mind, both on what Dr. Chimes said, as well as what Pastor Wright said. Back in 1970, that's when the modern definition of racism, which the left likes to push, is racism is prejudice plus power. I'm sure we've all heard, oh, a Black person can't be racist towards a white person because white people have more power. Or depending on where you are on this hierarchy of social power, that defines on whether or not you can be a victim or a perpetrator, which I find ridiculous. I'm sure most of or all of you find ridiculous as well. But this definition was first proposed in 1970 by a white professor at a university, which I find ridiculous that a white lady is basically telling Black people what racism is. And now that's what the left and, academia is universally accepted as a definition of racism, which plays into the whole idea of CRT. And one of the bigger issues with that definition is it doesn't allow people to transcend their social class. Once you are Black, or once you are white, or once you are yellow, or whatever, purple, green, whatever, you can't change that. No matter how successful you are, you could be a Black billionaire and you could be treating the white waiter at a restaurant like total crap because they're white, but you know what? Because you're Black, you can't be racist towards a white person. So it doesn't account for, what you've actually accomplished or who you are as a person. And I just find it ridiculous that people don't even know where that definition has come from. But that's just my 2 cents on it. It looks like Larry has been able to join us. Larry, would you mind just quickly introducing yourself to the group? And if you have anything to chime in about the definition of critical race theory, feel free to do so.
I'm just surprised that my head is so fat in this picture and you people have normal sized heads. So I don't know if I've got it right even yet. I'm Andrew Koch's dad. I'm in Delaware. I started teaching in 1967. And I look at things, I'm an old-fashioned liberal. I went into it to make a difference. When I would teach, I wouldn't take a lunch break. And look what happened to me after I stopped teaching. I was nice and thin and everything like that, but I was helping kids and I was living my dream of being a good teacher. And I always did my very best to look at everybody as an individual. But that's the problem, I think, with critical race theory. They look at everyone as a class. And if you deny that you look at people as a class, well, then you must be racist. If anything comes up like that, you must be racist. And it seems like it hurts more than it helps. It hurts an awful lot. I had a student in Morristown, New Jersey, a Black student who I knew was brighter than any of the other kids in the gifted class. And she had failed a test, and I said, how did this test says the lady was crossing the village square wearing a red dress at noon. Why didn't you put down, why did you put down a red dress? Well, the sun at that angle would probably, from where they were sitting, wouldn't look red. And I said, don't over intellectualize this. And we finally got her in the program and she was a star. And the next thing I know, people who think in racial terms, including Black people, said she was an Oreo and taunted her and treated her terribly when she was finally raised up. And things like that would be, to me, just absolute terrible. I had administrators, both white and Black, who would say nasty things about Blacks privately, but in public, they would enforce things that were a real problem. So I would go to all the colleges, Black colleges, white colleges, trying to get and recruit the best teachers I could recruit, especially looking for some Black males that might be helpful. I didn't have any on my staff. But then I get a call from central administration, here's a teacher you should hire because you need more Black teachers to keep up with the numbers. So I interviewed her and she said, and you don't have to call my previous principal because he's on vacation, which of course meant that I had to call her previous principal. And she was horrible. She was fired. And central office, just to get their numbers correct of how many teachers of this group and that group had lied to me, and probably would have hurt a lot of other kids because a Black principal was firing her. And when you start thinking so much of groups and stop thinking about individuals, kids are hurt and people are hurt. And I might be an anomaly, but I'm one of the original types of liberals. I believe absolutely in Martin Luther King's message, and I worked as the vice president of my college civil rights group, and those are the things that I believe in. And now I'm told that for working in remedial education, that was racist. That was a terrible thing I was doing, because that type of help, that all the problems are racial, and I shouldn't be assuming that there's things. I was trying to hide my guilt by doing that, and I reject all of those implications.
Of course. All right. Well, does anybody else have anything to say regarding what is CRT before we get on to the next topic, or the next point I'd like to get onto? All right. So what do people get wrong about CRT? Are there any myths that we'd be able to bust, or misunderstandings that we can kind of caress and have a better understanding about?
I think one of the things that people often misconstrue about CRT is that it's new. It's not new.
Exactly.
This is not a new phenomenon. It's not.
Yeah, to go off of what Dr. Chime said, as well as what Larry was just saying, affirmative action is kind of a root of where CRT kind of comes from, as well as what I was saying, where prejudice plus power, which 1970, that was 50 years ago. And I'm not against affirmative action in practice, or the genesis of it, where it actually comes from, because it served a lot of good for a long time. But right now we've seen the lawsuits against Harvard where Asian students are suffering disproportionately towards anybody. And nobody ever talks about it because on their hierarchy, Asian people are considered white, so they can't be victims, even though they're outperforming, but being discriminated against. CRT is just the new name that we're using, or it's not actually even a new name because it's been studied for years and years in an academic setting, but we're using it as kind of a throw off for a lot of different things. But I just want to make sure that we understand as conservatives what it actually is. And, you know, the left likes to say, oh, you know, they're just saying CRT so they don't have to teach about segregation or racism or this or that. The fact is, I have no problem acknowledging America's black eyes. I have no problem acknowledging any of the faults in history. I think they should be acknowledged. They need to be taught. That way we can learn from them. But it's a matter of recognizing where we are today and how far we've come from where we once were, rather than saying, this is where we were. How do we keep apologizing and how do we keep on trying to make something right? The reality is we can't always make things right. Sometimes we have to just recognize and reflect and just acknowledge it. That's the most we can do it for some things.
I think that's really poignant coming from a person who's Jewish. You know, when you hear about comparatively Holocaust education, there's a really good movie, I think I watched Snow Day, where it talked about not just the Holocaust, but what happened after, like immediately following the Holocaust. What happened when people had no homes to go to, and they were just kind of literally walking across Europe, wandering across Europe, finding a place to fit. And those wandering days happened not only to Jews who were displaced, but other Europeans who, you know, were kind of caught in the war, who lost everything. So you have to kind of start again. I think for African Americans here in the United States, our starting again happened, but there is a small segment of our population, Black, white, and indifferent, who use things like the boogeyman CRT to kind of stoke the fears, the flames of fear and oppression and all of that. And they have a vested interest in doing that. One, it wins them votes, it keeps them in power. It keeps people who are marginalized even more marginalized. It feeds that social services industrial complex that we talk about a lot at Frederick Douglass Foundation. It also prohibits the Black family. And so all of those things, you know, it's become a currency. You know, something, your kid's being taught something that you definitely don't like, whether it's diversity, equity, or inclusion, DEI, as we like to call it. You know, DEI in and of itself is not a bad thing. We do want diversity. We do want to see equity. We do want us to have some sort of inclusion. So if you see that, that's not, you know, call Fox News, you know, someone quick get One America on the phone. It may not be that situation. You cannot look at this as an alarmist, but it does give you an opportunity to kind of look further into what your child is being taught, under what context. Is it being taught in a vacuum, or is this something that's been kind of sprinkled across all of these educational platforms that may have an adverse effect on your child? Some of these concepts, I believe, are a little too high ranking for high school, middle school, especially elementary school students. There's a lot of space for this to be studied in college, where I first learned at CRT back at Grambling, you know, under a different guise. When you think of what would the world be like if American slavery never happened, if Blacks and whites were on equal footing in this nation, what would the nation would look like? We have TV shows that address the same thing, movies that address the same things. You look at the wickedly popular Bridgerton. If there was never a slavery and, you know, everything being equal, would we have these romantic relationships between Blacks and whites and Black women in power and Black men in power and all those kind of things? In that concept in a grander scheme with very nuanced, capable people looking at it, it is something we're thinking about. But when you're trying to broach that subject with a 12-year-old, you know,
it's
it can go
too heavy, yeah, for them.
Exactly.
You know,
It really is. I mean, at that age, preteen, you're trying to figure out who you are.
Right.
Mhm.
You know,
Your
you're going
little
through puberty,
shoulders
your
are not-
voice is changing, all that fun stuff. The
Exactly.
reality is it's an academic theory, but within schools right now, they're trying to push it as a practice. They're trying to teach it in math. You know, you're hearing that math is racist because of the way they're performing. You're hearing that in schools in California, they're actually no longer grading with D's and F's because it disproportionately affects people of color, which I'm looking at it. So you're saying that people of color cannot perform better than a D or an F? That sounds
Right.
racist to me. That sounds like they are being racist by pushing that policy. And it's ridiculous.
Is anybody on this call willing to admit that they've ever watched Saturday Night Live?
I know.
Love it. Yeah, I do.
So have you all seen the skit about the dating app Lowered Expectations?
Yes.
Oh.
Hilarious. One of my favorites.
Gonna have to
CRT.
YouTube it, Pastor Shannon.
You need to leave to see that.
Okay.
CRT is the Saturday Night Live version of Lowered Expectations dating.
Oh, okay.
Because
I-
what it says is, poor thing, bless your soul, you black, you ain't gonna do but so much. So we're just gonna, instead of expect you to rise to the level, we're gonna lower the level to where we think you are. And that was the premise of this whole Lowered Expectations. And that was the name of the dating site.
Lowered expectations.
I
Yes.
think that when, you know, we talk about misconceptions around CRT, so in our arena, we you know, I think it depends, like I said, the audience you're talking to. At the Frederick Douglass Foundation, we spend a great deal of our time reaching out to persuadable Blacks. Like that's one of our missions, right? We could preach all day to the choir, and if you ever want someone to come speak at your event and get your crowd riled up, we can do that. But part of our challenge is also reaching out to people in Baltimore City and people in Prince George's County, people that are Democrats, people that have been inundated with some of the Black liberation theology, the whole framework surrounding Black oppression in the United States. And one of the traps that I think that the left is really cleverly set for us is they try to get people to believe that critical race theory is a curriculum, and they try to get people to look at it in overly simplistic terms. I personally believe they kind of seed the media with these extreme stories about math being racist because the goal of it is to throw you off the trail. At its fundamental core, critical race theory is a tool to subvert capitalism and implement Marxism. Like that's why it is extremely important to understand that the critical theory, the idea itself came out of 1930s Germany. You put two and two together there. All right. So the reality is that when you look at something like CRT, we have to be cautious that we aren't being thrown off the trail and being baited into a, you know, outrage over things that don't really matter and kind of focus on the heart of the issue. One of the biggest misconceptions about CRT is that it teaches history. You spend time with the Frederick Douglass Foundation and the Douglass Leadership Institute, you'll learn real quick that they don't teach history. If you haven't read Bob Woodson's Red, White, and Black, we just had him. I think I know that Delegate Nicole Bennet was on that call with Bob Woodson. He'll set you straight real quick. CRT does not teach Black history. It is not Black history. If you really want Black history, if you want to know how we were actually successful here in the United States, you'd stay as far away from CRT as possible because everything about the Black experience in the United States has flown in the face of critical theory. Ask them about 1920s Black America. Ask them about the Tulsa race riots and the aftermath of all of that. Ask them how Black Americans got their first schools. And the answer you get is, well, we can't look at all those. Let's go back to 1619, right? Let's go back to all them. It's like you have 1619 slavery, then this dark ages, and then civil rights and Malcolm X, right? There was a whole lot that happened in between there. America's dirty little secret.
Well, let's talk about how Black history doesn't start at American slavery.
That's true.
Yes, absolutely.
If we're going to talk about history, there are some tremendous new history books out there. Black History 365. Eyes on you, Dr. Brenda. I'm still wanting that.
Yes, my daughter. I have her do little reports every now and again. I'll catch her. I'm like, okay, read your book. I want a little one-page summary by the end of the evening.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book. I ended up buying one. It's an amazing book, as well as Level Up history from the Heritage Foundation. So there are alternatives to people who would like to take a look at Black history from a historic perspective. But, you know, as we kind of venture closer and closer, inch closer and closer to Black History Month, before they start rolling out, you know, their I Have a Dream speeches and whatnot, I do want people to realize that, you know, when we talk about Black history was yesterday. Black history is Dr. Khan. I mean, straight up and down, living, breathing, walking, talking Black history. Living, breathing, walking, talking Black history is Pastor Shannon Wright. You know, history for some has to be of a certain age, antiquated for it to be valuable. And I think that's something that as
50 years ago, 100 years ago.
Right. I think it's something as Black Americans, we have to move away from that. We really do have to move away from that, because what it does is it marginalizes the successes that we're enjoying now. It is a tremendous success to have a Black Republican woman serving in the House of Delegates. That is, not many things take my breath away. And Josh, you know me by now. And not many things take my breath away. It is rare occasion that Nicole Bennet is moved to tears, but when that whole situation with Dr. Thiam being appointed was coming about, you talk about on our faces for you. You talk about what do I need to do? Who do I need to kneecap? Whose edges need to be snatched? You know,
she brags about you often.
For sure. And then that swearing in and watching it, you know, from my office and being overcome with emotion in that moment in history, not because I thought it would never happen, because I knew it was going to happen. The door was going to get kicked in eventually, but to see it happen and be a part of that moment, that kind of history is what we should be teaching. And that speaks to diversity, that speaks to equity, that speaks to inclusion, but it also speaks to being a good American, right?
Of course.
Can you notice how being a good American is not important anymore? It's just
Larry,
not.
did you have something to say?
I'd like to continue what was done by, I'm trying to read the little letters, Mr. Snow, Torrey. I think it is that Black history, not Black history, excuse me, critical race theory has actually hurt minorities. When you have a school system in your state supported by politicians that is a national joke about how violent some schools can be, about how low achieving people who have a 1.3 average might be valedictorian. And this is not an issue for them. They don't try to reform it. When you have places like New York City, which has a new mayor, thank God, who is trying to get rid of crime, where, like Baltimore, students, children, adults, it's reaching epic proportions. And immediately the people from the Black Power movement said, you can't do this, you can't do that. They did not propose one way of reducing the mass murder that is heavily affecting Blacks more than any other community in inner cities.
They gave not so real threats, is what they did. They said, if you re-implement these things, there will be blood.
As a matter of fact, Eric Adams took almost all the Black communities. He was opposed by AOC and the progressives, and the only ones where they won the vote basically were white upper class liberals. He showed that working and middle class people of different groups, Blacks, whites, and others, want a safe city. But one last story, there's a professor at the University of Illinois who was out because his wife had passed on a bereavement leave. When he came back, this white coach found on his door Black Lives Matter poster. He took it down and he put that up. All lives matter according to my Lord Jesus Christ. He was ordered to remove it because it was so controversial. That's the faith of people who are abolitionists. That's the faith that built America, was the idea that all lives matter. He was ordered to remove it, and then he was fired. Where are the church people who are saying, by firing him, you have disavowed the majority belief and faith of America? Where is the Civil Liberties Union that someone has spoken their mind? It might differ. It's not against the idea that Black Lives Matter. It says all lives matter, but they're not standing up to defend him. When people oppose this, whites or blacks, they are put down. And I agree totally. They are not progressives. They are not in the line of Martin Luther King or Teddy Roosevelt or any of those philosophy people. They are Marxists. They are Stalinists because they do not allow anyone else's opinion.
Larry, if I can, if you don't mind, just real quickly, just to respond to that, I think that you are over the target when you speak about myths and misconceptions about critical race theory and the movements that spawn from them. To me, among the greatest myths, including Black history, is that the Black Lives Matter is a moral movement and one based in ideology. There is nothing moral or ideological, I don't know what the word is. Anyway, there's nothing moral about these movements. There is no moral high ground. They try to claim that they are interested in the lives, but in Baltimore City, where more than 1,000 people, mostly African-American, were either killed or wounded, casualties that no military commander would ever accept in an active military combat scene. And yet we're seeing this happen to our elderly women, our young children. And when you cannot get a single voice to decry that, those that claim that Black Lives Matter, they don't believe that. And again, a trap from those of us on the conservatives is we try to call them out on their hypocrisy, but they have no moral code. They have no moral standing. They have no ideology. Their allegiance is to Marxist politics. They are a political movement. They are no different than people that show up and go door knocking for a candidate during election season. And the sooner we come to grips that the movements that spawn from the critical race theory are political and not moral, the sooner we can begin to push actual moral teaching, actual ideological appeals. And the reality is they know that they will lose the moral battle every time. They'll never engage you on a moral battle. They know they'll lose the ideological battle. We are Americans. We like freedom. We like liberty. They know they would lose every time. Always remember that critical theory and its accompanying message, and you can, and I say critical theory, and I do that on purpose because you will see critical race theory, you see critical sex theory, you see critical identity theory. There are all sorts of applications in which they take the same exact model with the single goal of disrupting the powerful United States system established and based on free market principles, and they want to supplant it and replace it with a Marxist socialist oriented model. Keep that in mind and we'll be all right in this fight.
All right. First of all, I agree.
Space theory. Yeah. Okay.
I agree 100%, first of all. Second of all, you have to realize when we try to play by their rules, they change the rules. Like, that's just the way it is. You try to call them out on their hypocrisy, they change it. You try to call them out on anything, you try to, so they cancel one of our guys for doing something. We find one of their guys for doing the same thing. Oh, well, they're above that. The rules no longer apply. Holding Alec Baldwin to, gun safety regulations. Oh, well, it was an accident. We blame the other guy. We blame this. We blame that. rules don't apply. It's all insane. And the more you try to understand or play by the rules, the more crazy you get. It's insane.
They
But
call it
before-
moving the goalpost in football.
Exactly. But before I go on to the next point I want to get to, I do want to touch on one other thing. Critical race theory, talking about it, it's not always a white versus black or, black and white issue, as metaphorical and as literal as that sounds. It isn't. As a Jew, as a Zionist, as a third generation Holocaust survivor, my grandfather survived Auschwitz. I've been to Auschwitz twice, once with my grandfather. He passed a few years ago, but I went to Auschwitz with him when I was 13 years old. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in DC. I've been to the Holocaust Museum Yad Vashem in Israel. I served in the Israeli army. I've been called a white supremacist. I've been called a neo-Nazi. I've been called every bad word in the book on the right and the left, and it all pisses me off. But the fact is, Jews, Israelis, Zionists, critical race theory definitely puts us into a box in academia, and it's a lot of propaganda and misinformation that a lot of people don't pay attention to because they're too busy playing the white versus black game. They like to say that Israel is colonizers. It's all white colonizers, and Jews are white supremacists, and that's what they always say. That's the argument they always defer to. And the reality is, Israel is as much Middle Eastern olive skin tone as they are Ethiopian. Has a lot of immigrants from Sudan, actually, and a lot of Ashkenazi, white-looking Eastern European like me as well. I'm not going to deny it, but there's a good mix of people. But calling Israel white supremacist, that's a load of malarkey. And trying to say it's colonizing, that completely rewrites history from 1948 onwards. And we're not here to talk about Israel and Zionism, although I would like to do another thing on that in the future. But I definitely wanted to make sure we mention it so it's not neglected, because it definitely does play into the critical race theory role a lot. Too many people, like I said, oh, Jews, they're white supremacists. Oh, Jews, they're colonizing. They're this, they're that. And it drives.
Just keep in mind, Joshua, that the goal of any critical theory is division. That if you keep your eyes focused on that ball, they want to divide. It's that simple. You cannot have a strong free market society with a united society, so they just divide us. Keep that in mind, and it applies to everything. LGBT.
Taking those groups of people and just separating them and creating division and diversity, men versus women. Heterosexual versus homosexual, we've all read the original manifesto on the BLM website where it's destroy the nuclear family, destroy the Zionist state as well as in there. So there is a lot of common ground, but I definitely just want to make sure I touched on that before we move on to the next point. My next point is, how can parents or concerned citizens, people without children, be aware of what's going on in the classroom, and what kind of recourse is there? Like, we know what happened down in Virginia, which is great, but on the boots on the ground, what can we do? I'd like to start with that one quickly, if I could. Prior to political life, I was a special ed teacher. I taught special ed for many years, and I was an administrator and a director. So I spent a lot of time in the classrooms working with teachers, supporting the needs of students with autism. And I decided to step out of that in 2019 and join the political arena. But my years in Washington County, I spent a lot of time observing teachers teaching, not necessarily observing teachers, but more so observing how students respond to teachers' instruction, how students engage with the delivery of the teacher's instruction. So I think most importantly, what parents need to do is pay attention to those homework assignments that come home. I'm always hovering over my daughter. What are you doing? What are you guys talking about in English class? What are you talking about in history class? What are you talking about in philosophy? That's another tricky class where, she's taken this year, and they engage in some pretty heavy conversations. So I think as parents, we have to be involved in the learning of what our children are getting in school. Ask questions. What is that assignment that you're working on? And certainly if there's anything that's controversial or that you think that might be a little bit too hairy, reach out to your child's teacher. I've done that before. What's up with this book, Dante? My daughter had to read at the beginning of the school year. It was a pretty racy book. That I thought it was pretty. Yeah, it was pretty heavy book. It was quite heavy enough to where she, couldn't quite understand the genre, the type of verbiage that was used. So I bought my own version of it to read along with her. But I think as parents now, more so than ever before, we've got to insert ourselves in what our children are learning in school. We have to. We have some very radical teachers that don't believe in things that my husband and I teach my daughter. They may believe in something totally opposite. So I always, and my husband, instill in our daughter deep values, core beliefs, principles, and making sure that she's rooted at home so that when she gets in school and her teacher come off with some wackadoodle mess, she can say, no, that ain't what my mama told me. That's what I always jokingly tell her. If someone says something to you or try to teach you or impose some thought on you that is contradictory to what me and your dad say, you have to respect your teachers, but hold on to those teachings. So I think first it has to start in the home. Parents have to really parent hard in the home so that when kids get out there with those wolves, they won't be harmed.
I agree with Dr. Brenda. I agree 100% with what she's saying. I think nowadays, we have to parent differently. I think America went through this kind of honeymoon phase with public educators, and take nothing away from them. They have a tremendous job. The goal is huge to take kids of every race, of every background, and give them a general education. And that is nothing to shake a stick at. I'm sure that's much more difficult than what I do day to day. But what I will say is, during that honeymoon phase, parents sent their kids off to school, hoped, prayed for the best, and went on about building careers and homes and all those kind of things. That was kind of where America was when you think of, the late 80s, the early 90s, even some of the 2000s, early 2000s, where parents just kind of trusted what the school system did. In every dark cloud, there's a silver lining. And this dark cloud that we're experiencing with this pandemic, of course, death and destruction, but the silver lining is that people had to be families again. Children were at home with their actual parents, and they had to engage. Parents had to kind of pay attention to what was going on. Most families don't have 3 and 4 and 6 and 8 laptops for everybody to be kind of online and together at one time. So you did have to kind of lend an ear to some of the things that were happening in your kids' class, kind of listening to some of that conversation. And it raised a lot of red flags across the country with parents going, well, wait a minute. I just need you to, know how to add some fractions. I don't need you to learn all this extra. And when did we get here? Well, we got here when everyone else was busy chasing that dollar, making your way to the middle class. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not parent shaming in the slightest, because, as a parent, I did the very same thing. The difference is that when you have children and you give them core beliefs at home, and you say, listen, just what you said, Dr. Brenda, I've said to my daughter, Sarah, out here in this world, people are going to try to influence you on a lot of things. But there are 3 things that you can build your life on and know for sure: that God loves you. You are his most favored, honored, and treasured daughter. And I need you to always conduct yourself as if you are God's favorite, right? That solves a whole lot of social issues with that one. The second thing is that your family loves you. You are my only child. Even if I had a million other kids just like you, I love every single hair on your head. So I would not tell you something knowingly that's going to put you in a bad situation. And thirdly, there are going to be people who want to curry influence with you for a myriad of reasons. So I always need you to have your antenna up. And that includes your instructors, your teachers. You do need to be respectful of them. But if there's something that doesn't sound quite right, that lays on your soul wrong, put it in a box and we'll talk about it later. That's what dinner time is for, right? We sit down and she says, well, my teacher told me that, you know, all the Egyptians were white. I'm like, well, you know, we've been to Africa, right? I'm just going to be real honest with you. I don't know where she got that from. Let's do a little research project for you. So there are a lot of things that parents can do to kind of build a better relationship with their children when it comes to learning things outside of the home. But I think what you said, Dr. Brenda, is very important. We have to parent a different way. We can no longer go in with this blind trust because now we're seeing some things that we weren't aware of. And not from all educators, again. I think because of where we are politically, this has become a much hotter button issue. But I'm glad that parents are looking. I'm really glad parents are looking.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Everybody just kind of jumped in at once there. I'll step back.
Sure.
Everyone else can go, then I will say my.
Yeah,
two
no,
cents.
I was just going to say that education is a team sport. I was highly amused, by the way, in covering the press conference yesterday, seeing Senate President Bill Ferguson, Maggie McIntosh, Stephanie Smith, all of these delegates and politicians up there insisting that they will stay in in-person instruction, which I don't have any problem with that. But I kept thinking, what changed all of a sudden? And I was trying to speculate, why were all of these politicians suddenly so desperate to keep kids away from virtual learning? And it actually just hit me today, because I spent some time figuring out, they don't want you seeing what's going on in those schools. That's what is motivating this, right? And I was thinking, like, the whole headache that they had, when you ask what you can do about critical theory, like, shine a light, right? You shine a light into schools and the roaches are scurrying, right? Like, that's really what's going on here. And the reality is that education's a team sport, right? A good education system is going to have a proper partnership and agreement between the parents, the teachers, and the students. And more, as Nicole alluded to, it's coming to light that schools are not serving as education centers, they are serving as indoctrination centers. And now policymakers are desperately trying to get parents out of that classroom. My message to parents: stay in the classroom, document everything. As a broadcaster, it is really hard for me to work with, I heard that this was happening at this school. When someone hands me a press release that has, this is an example of something that was taught. Here's a picture of a school's homework assignment. This is what came home with my child, today. This is the book that was sent. That is something that can drive the public discussion. So I would say if there's any gap when it comes to addressing some of the things that are being taught in our schools, it's really important for parents to document, capture the information. Someone has to invest the time to going in and looking at the curriculums. They'll give you all sorts of grief for it. Get eyes on the curriculum. That's all that's necessary. I don't think you have to kick people out of office or anything. Just let them know that you're looking. Let them know that you're watching. It's just like a police car sitting with the radar gun. That's all it is.
I think Dr. Chem could shed better light on this. How much access is there for citizens, even non-parents, to the curriculum? How transparent is that? Can people make requests, or how involved can people actually be beyond just monitoring homework and making a stink and shedding light on it, which is great. Nothing against it. That's a great thing to do. But in terms of greater action items to actually do, especially for concerned people who don't have the benefit of having children, what can we do?
Right.
Show up.
I know here. Yeah, that's true. And talk to your teachers. Talk to the teachers. Certainly whenever I taught, I had parents ask me to send the book home that their child was reading, or send the math book home, and what was the name of the book, so that they could make copies of the book, or at least a few pages of the book. Here in Washington County, parents do have access to curriculum materials that are used to support instruction. Parents have access to that information. And actually a bill that I pre-filed extends above and beyond curriculum materials into the school library. What books are in the school library? With all the conversations that are going on now with Longboard and these other books that are really heavy content for teenagers, my bill is going to include or includes language where parents can be giving access to what books are in their child's school library. And not necessarily to ban the books. We don't want to start burning books and banning books per se, but at least be privy to what those books are, the title of those books, the contents, what's in those books. So parents have that right at the instructional level to find out what curricular materials are used to drive instruction.
Again, though, you're saying parents. I'm asking, though, what about other people who aren't parents? What about people who want to know what's going on because they're still concerned about
It's public information. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
that's
public information.
I was
Right.
not
Parent,
sure.
uncle, you don't have kids, it's parent information.
And
I will,
Public information.
I think I would add in that parents have particular power and influence in this discussion, right? And I think that,
Yes.
the problem is if outside third parties start getting involved, I think a little bit of the power gets sucked away from it. Not that it can't be there, but I really do feel that this is a mission for parents specifically because it's their kids. And I mean, I would love to see a legislator get up and argue why a parent, look at what happened in Virginia, right?
Yeah, no, I know.
People
I
didn't
remember
care
Terry
about the special
McAuliffe said
interests.
parents should have no say, and that's what cost them the election.
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
Nicole Hannah-Jones, 1619 project, she just said the other day, I don't know why parents should be involved in the classroom or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they're all insane. And I'm not saying that everybody and their brother should have a say in what's going on in kids' classrooms. No, but I am saying that, people should have the access to transparency because ultimately the public schools are the breeding ground, the indoctrination of what's going to be going on for the next generation. The thought police ultimately. So to know what's going on, to know how it's going on, to know what the propaganda is, that's how we can actually fight it and confront it. If we don't know, if I don't have kids for another 5 years and they're not in school for another 12, 15 or whatever, by then it's already too late because what's going on in schools will get worse and worse. To get involved now and to know what's going on now, it's to be proactive.
So
I
attend the
think
school
you
board
are-
Yes. Mhm.
Yes.
I
Attend
did
the
not
school
know, I
board
did not know
meetings.
they are public.
Yes, they are. Go
Yes.
on
I don't
your
know
county's
these things.
website.
I am a layman, average Joe. Look, my collar might be white, but I'm a blue collar working class guy.
No, you can roll up in your county's
Yeah.
school board meetings. The public ones,
listen.
not the ones that are closed session, but certainly.
Yeah.
the public ones.
As a voter, you have a say on who serves on that school board. So, rather than just pick people's names that you think sound familiar or may sound right on stationery, or the first 5 people who were blessed enough to have names that start with A, B, maybe a C or D. I will just say, as a politician, I will say, as in any other election, I need people to go into that balloting situation, that election situation, with their eyes wide open. The teachers union puts out an Apple ballot with their blessed, I guess is probably not a good word, but their pre-chosen, pre-selected candidates. And I think probably this will be the year where that poison apple ballot comes back to bite them on the butt. I don't know many candidates who are bucking to get on that apple ballot because the mama bears and the papa bears are hungry and they're looking for someone's head to put on a stick. But as someone who doesn't have children, Josh, I will say, go to your county's Board of Education website. And on that website, you'll see a calendar of events. You'll see lots of information about, school systems like to brag on the wonderful things that they do. They do get quite a few things right. And sometimes things that don't go quite so right, you can tell because they're having meetings about it. And I'm going to tell you, this is not a moment where you're going to want to bring some Fisher's popcorn and the cold drink and sit back. It's not the most exciting thing you ever do with your life, but it is quite informative, and it'll give you, as a prospective new parent, or someone who's considering moving to a particular county and settling down with a family, an idea of that, if that particular school system kind of falls in line with your personal beliefs and what you believe your family's beliefs will be. So there are plenty of ways to get that information. You just have to look for it.
Pastor Wright, I actually have something you might be able to speak a little bit more on as well. So
Okay.
Baltimore City has an appointed school board, not an elected school board. So how can people actually confront or combat that when they have no say in who's actually being appointed? I know ultimately they're appointed by the mayor, and of course the mayor is elected, but it's Baltimore City. So what are your thoughts on that, being a Baltimore City resident and somebody who formerly ran for mayor?
So you really don't have much say. That's the short of it.
Wow.
Because what happens is the mayor gets elected, the mayor makes appointments. Once those folks are placed on the school board hires the superintendent. Only the school board can get rid of the superintendent, and currently there is no chartered vehicle to be able to force anything once these folks are in place. But this election cycle will be the first time that Baltimore City will have one or two spots. They're actually adding to the board by 2. So there'll be 2 elected folks on the Board of Education starting in this election cycle. But that's the first time ever. It's always been who was appointed, who knew the mayor best, who had the most dirt. Did I say that out loud?
So 2 out of how many though? How many people serve on the Baltimore City school board, if you don't mind me asking?
9.
I was going to say that I'm a union member for 53 years of either the AFT or the NEA, and I've continued with my NEA because I have different insurance on it. The first president we had was Albert Shanker, and Albert Shanker was asked, how come you're promoting this? It doesn't benefit students. And he said, students don't pay my salary. He was very frank. We now have people like this Weingarten who does the most for her members, but lies and says that she's doing it for the children. You are the only real advocate for children. I would get the mission statement of the school, and when something goes wrong, you'd say, they try some type of propagandize that we've talked about. How does this fit with your mission statement? I would also fight for the best teacher, okay? You are the advocate for your children. If you have a bad teacher, your children are going to suffer. I have seen good teachers next to bad teachers, next to mediocre teachers. I'm not too sure I believe in the good school and the bad school. It depends what happens in the classroom. And I don't think you can depend on the curriculum as this is what is happening in the classroom. This is just a framework, and it's often ignored. I once, even though I retired, I substitute taught, and I went in one classroom that was chaos, and then I went into another classroom, which was social studies, and the students were talking about what they would do if they ran the schools, and the boys said they would legitimize short dresses, and the girls had their arguments. And I said, I'm going to make a statement. I think what you've got to do is go home. I was in the same classroom you were in the period before. It was a math class, and you're not going to learn anything. And it was just chaos, and no one paid any attention to the teacher. And the union won't do anything, and the principal won't do anything. And you're not going to go and complain about this teacher, but you can tell your parents, I'm not learning math. Because you know what's going to happen if you don't learn math? You're going to go to this college or that college. they're going to give you a big test for reading, math, and writing. If you fail it, you're going to have to keep taking that test. You want to be a fireman, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a businessman. They won't let you take any courses until you pass the minimum competency test. You're going to be drained of money and eventually you're going to drop out. This will determine your future. Your parents have to advocate and say, there's no learning going on in that classroom. My child is going to fail that test if you don't go in there. Otherwise, I want my child removed from the class. You've got to play hardball. No one is going to protect your kid. Not the union, not the school board, not the principal. You're the one who has to advocate for them to help them succeed and get the most out of their school.
Appreciate what's been said. However, in Baltimore City, it seems to be a completely different animal. I agree that no one is going to advocate like a parent would, but the parents, we have multi-generations of a broken system in Baltimore City. So we have folks that are now parents and grandparents who went through the same system and didn't realize that wasn't the way it goes everywhere. So you have folks that actually believe that through social promotion and their child is moving up to the next grade, that they're actually learning something and have no clue that when their child graduates with that piece of paper and then goes and gets accepted at a college and takes a basic proficiency exam, that they are not going to pass. That's a rude awakening for a lot of folks. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get that message across, get that reality to people that just because you send your child to a building every day and they come home with a book and they get a piece of paper 4 times a year that says this is what your kid is doing in the class, doesn't mean they're actually learning. And so we're trying to get folks to understand, looking at their report card and seeing their grades is one thing, it's cute, but it's not enough. You have to know what your child should be learning, what they're not learning, the type of social promotion and policy that's going on. I mean, in Baltimore City, we got ghost students, which we've got grade changing, we've got all sorts of issues. So I'm hopeful that Baltimore City is actually an anomaly, that these types of things aren't going on in all the districts around the state. But there needs to be some significant work. And the first line of defense absolutely is the parent. First, last, in the middle, on top, on the bottom, the parent. Because they're the ones that have direct access to the materials that come home, to the teachers, to the principals, to the buildings, to actually see. One of the other things that you can do, pop up at the school. Some schools will tell you because of COVID, we're not going to let you in, but others, if you gently remind them it is a public building paid for with tax dollars, they will think twice about turning you away. So if you're really that concerned, another great thing you can do, go to the Maryland Department of Education. They put out a report card of all the schools. They tell you how the schools are performing, if their graduation rates are going up or down, if their SAT scores on average are going up and down. If you, Joshua, for example, if you're looking to be a parent and trying to decide where you want to settle, first thing I would suggest you do is look at the Maryland State Education report card for all the schools. If you see a school that is performing at a below average and has a improvement plan, that means they're not even close to where they should be. And they had to go through a process to get a plan to get from where they are to where they should be. That would be the first thing I would suggest for anyone that's a taxpayer that is not a parent, but still wants to see where their tax dollars are going and that they're being effectively spent. Start by looking at that Maryland State school report card. If you live in jurisdictions that has a school that's on a probationary review, if you will, I would start by attending those meetings and ask for, why come you on that list? How come you want us to believe you are effectively spending our tax dollars to educate children when you can't even get the paper to line up right and have an improvement plan of your own? So there's questions that can be asked.
All right. Well, thank you. I definitely will do that. And like I said, I am looking to try to be more involved and just have a greater understanding of what's going on. I am a homeowner, I'm a taxpayer, and whether or not I become a parent one day, it's still important to know what's going on and where my money's going. You know, we're
Yep.
conservatives. I consider myself a small government fiscal conservative, so knowing where the money is going is always important. But on to the next point, and we are getting near the end, just so you guys know. I know it's gotten a little long, but what other concerns in the classroom should we be aware of? And is critical gender theory of equal concern? I know Torrey kind of mentioned before, he likes to just say critical theory, and I would like to agree with that. We called this one critical race theory only because more people, like I said, critical race theory has become more of the rallying call. You know, we can go a whole separate conversation about critical gender theory. I've heard nightmares about students, you know, teachers helping students transition without their parents knowing. I've heard about students identifying as different animals, cats or dogs, and teachers putting litter boxes in classrooms. Yes, that's real, happening in Texas. A friend of mine told me about that. It's insane. But there's so many different things that happen behind the closed doors or in the ivory towers of academia. What don't we know that we should be aware of?
A whole bunch, apparently.
You
You
know,
know, Tori and Nicole, I got to give y'all credit for having a real good poker face. Because when Joshua was talking about the litter boxes in the classroom, y'all
I'm
poker
like-
face didn't crack. I was
Nicole, I put that in our
applaud you.
group chat last week. You must have missed that.
Nothing
Nicole.
surprises us anymore, and that's
That was in our
that's
group chat.
scary.
I shared that
That's
with you.
scary that nothing surprises us anymore. Really.
It was definitely in our group chat already. So yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
a friend of mine
Well,
who's
I
a
would say-
realtor down in Texas, you know, her daughter was telling her all about that, and her daughter's like 5th grade or 6th grade or something. And I'm like, what the hell? When I was in 5th or 6th grade, you know, I was learning math and history, and, you know, 9/11 happened or whatever. I don't know.
I think I can tell you, you know, coming up with these issues, right? I'm cursed, and Nicole kind of knows this, right? I think past most issues, right? And I you know, when I'm on the air, I deal with a lot of stuff, and some stuff is foolishness and some stuff matters, right? That situation, while, you know, it's, again, not entirely convinced that sometimes the left just puts these things out there just to get Tucker Carlson riled up. The reality is that there are legitimately dangerous things that are being pushed, and they have significant impacts on our community, right? I mean, I think about yesterday, Delegate Maggie McIntosh literally said that in Baltimore City, and she's probably not wrong, but it was harrowing to me. It should have been shocking. She said the safest place for many of our students is our public schools. Now, I want you to think, this is Baltimore City. A Baltimore City public school is allegedly the safest place for many of our students. And the reality is that she might be right. What it speaks to is, how bad does a home life have to be that the safest place for that student is a Baltimore City public school, in which on New Year's Day, we had 2 high school age children killed.
Mhm.
So,
That's
but
the,
they're not. But see,
Well,
here's the
New
thing.
Year's Eve, wasn't there the 5-year-old who killed his shot his 3-year-old sister or something?
right. So the
6-year-old
point, the
son.
point that I'm getting at is that the end game is the family, right? The end game is the destruction of American society. And when you look at critical gender theory, its entire goal is to completely destroy the concept of masculinity, destroy the concept of femininity, because in that construct, you cannot have a mother and a father who love each other and love their children, who love their parents, and creates a self-sustaining government, that a self-sustaining community that is independent of government aid. It cannot exist. And so everything related to critical theory, including critical gender theory, exist with the sole purpose of establishing political power for the Marxist agenda. Like, if you look at it from that perspective, critical gender theory erodes the family, critical race theory erodes the community and disempowers. I mean, in whatever aspect of this framework, its only goal is to divide and to destroy. And so I'm concerned about all of it.
Yeah,
This
you
is
know,
where I get in trouble, because when you look at that, especially the critical gender theory, to me, the best encyclopedia that you're going to find for me is the Bible. For other folks, it includes that list of groups of books includes the Torah and the Quran, and I get that. But when you're a person of faith, regardless of what your faith is, when you teach your child what's in those books, it really, the stuff they teach them in the classroom really flies in the face of that. So you really have to double down and be rooted in the moral, ethical, so the principles, the core values and beliefs. Now, I get in trouble with the whole gender theory thing, and I'm not going to go into detail on why, but I get in trouble for that because I hear what Torrey is saying about the root and the disruption and the social economic fabric and destroying all of that, but it goes deeper than that. You cannot have a theory that people give credence and credibility to about who and what you are, what you want to name yourself, unless there is already a hole in your spirit that you are trying to use something else to fill. Because these theories can't take root in a spirit, in a body, in a family, in a mind that is whole and complete. They can't live there. So when you look at these theories, that tells me parents aren't parenting, teachers aren't teaching, preachers aren't preaching, and we got a whole bunch of broken stuff going on.
Well,
so
beyond the theoretical aspect of gender theory, if you will, there are real victims to it. Look at the sports. My younger sister, she's 10 years younger than me. You know, I'm 30. I might be the youngest one here, maybe not, but my younger sister is now 20. When she was in high school in Connecticut, she ran cross country. And we all know the runners in Connecticut, they were the first ones who got the national spotlight on them, where you had the two transgenders that were running on the cross country teams, and she competed against them. My younger sister was not a top athlete, so it really didn't affect her placing, but fellow members on her team were definitely disenfranchised and lost out because they had to run against people that had male chromosomes, male DNA, male anatomy, males, if you will, biological males. And now you're seeing that in other sports. You're seeing that in college with males competing in swimming and other things. And, as much as you can pay attention to your kids' homework and this, that, and the other, this is happening as a national trend. You can look at J.K. Rowling, who made billions off of Harry Potter, got canceled for being critical of transgenderism by saying a woman is a woman, a man is a man. She did not say anything bad about transgenders, only that they are not women or they are not men. They are something separate. But she is effectively canceled. She is now she who must not be named. It is that ridiculous and that far-reaching to the cancel culture of it all, and how much it's been embraced by the media, the far left, and even the younger people who think it's the hip, young, cool thing to do of, J.K. Rowling, she's evil, or, they're trans, of course they can compete. It's become wholly embraced by the mainstream. And that is a real concern because there are real victims there, and that's something that's not being addressed.
I could just put out there, she's still selling books and she's still making movies. So
ain't that cancelable?
Hard to cancel a billionaire. I'm just put that.
She's still making money hand over fist, but anytime she's in the conversation, people, she's a TERF. She's transphobic. She's this, she's that. She's been given death threats constantly. Like, hey, I'm not saying I sympathize for her because, of course, she's rich and she's making money hand over fist. But at the same time, that just shows how much the mainstream has embraced that ideology of.
I always push back and say that they haven't.
Yeah, there you go.
They haven't embraced
it. If anything, they're the loudest. They're not the majority.
They're not the majority.
They are the loudest.
When they stop selling those books, then you'll know they're in trouble.
That control
the majority
the media.
That is how they are.
For example, to support what Joshua said about people being victimized, in Washington state, you determine which prison you go to if you've committed a crime, a male prison or a female prison. You declare what you are, and then they assign you, including somebody who is a serial killer of women decided that they are actually a woman and has been placed into a woman's prison. This is the level of insanity. I don't mind what people do or don't do in the privacy of their own homes, but it reaches the level of craziness. Or Senator Warren wants to punish any hospital that has a certain percentage of young minority women who die in childbirth, that it must be racism. The fact that a lot of young minority poor children don't go see a doctor early, are having children when they are still children. She presumes it was because of racism and neglect, but you know who is scared if her law is ever passed because it sounds good? The ones who will lose are inner city hospitals, because they're the ones who care for these women when they can't afford any other hospital, and they're the ones who are going to be punished because of it. Torrey, they control the media.
So I would caution, and I always remind everyone in the Frederick Douglass Foundation, pretty much anyone that we're working with, one of the biggest and most pervasive lies of the left is that they matter and people care about them. They constantly push that lie out. Look at what happened in Minneapolis. You would have thought that the fund the police movement was a thing. And Minneapolis, they had all those people, yeah, we're going to defund the police department. The people said, yeah, get out of here with that nonsense, right? Like the left is really, really good at lying about how powerful they are. And we always constantly push with our members. You keep pushing the message, you keep telling the truth, because at the end of the day, there's a whole lot of people that believe the truth, but they aren't saying so. And I'm not diminishing the influence of media, right? I know firsthand how much influence the media has. What I challenge is, does that influence actually translate into impacting the American ideology? Exactly. I don't really know, right? Because Trump still thinks he has a chance, and I'm not entirely sure that that's not true, right? There's a reason that the Democrats are so aggressive on many of these issues. The left assumes that they have a monopoly on these things. Let's talk on November 6, 2022 and see just how much influence they have.
I know, it can't come soon enough.
I think we all have some strong opinions regarding critical gender theory as well, and I'd be certainly open to doing a separate discussion on that in the future. I did just want to touch on that, and I'm glad we did. But back to CRT, do we have any final thoughts, any takeaways before we wrap it up and just,
It's real history. Go ahead.
Revisionist history doesn't work. We have to stick to and learn from where we've actually been, so that we don't repeat the mistakes or make even worse ones in the future. And I think if we could just accept what has happened, look at events as they actually were, learn from them, and move forward, we'd be much better off than trying to really subscribe to the smoke and mirrors and revisionist history. And I just also want to thank you for including me in this. And if you do the critical gender theory, please reach out. But unfortunately, I kind of have to log off, and I do apologize.
Well, we're wrapping up, so we appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
See you, Pastor Wright.
Bye. Good to see you. I'll just take this moment to steal the microphone and say Red, White, and Black by Bob Woodson. Get it, Read it, buy a copy for your friend, buy another copy for your other friend. Red, White, and Black. To me, it is the seminal work on critical theory and how we ought to handle that. If you go to Amazon, you can get one. Frederick Douglass Foundation, we're working on getting a stock where you can get them at a discount price. But get that book. It will change your perspective on this entire discussion.
I'm just elated that you can have more than one friend.
Well, if I could piggyback on what Torrey is saying, there is some required reading so that interested parties kind of raise their knowledge base. One is a favorite book of mine by Jason Riley, Please Stop Helping Us. It addresses all of these issues and presents it in a way from a Black perspective, saying, you know, sometimes the help is worse than the problem that we're having.
Yes.
You know, and when you double down on helping, when I'm asking you not to help me, you become a bigger problem. This is why things that should be so easy have become so complex. You know, our social safety net is really very much a net. Most people get their foot caught in it and never seem to escape it. Instead of being a trampoline where bad things happen, you get down on your luck a little bit and you use it to bounce yourself back to where you were before. What we're doing is we're catching people in this net and not showing them the way to get out, but instead building an industry around keeping them stuck in the net. So Please Stop Helping Us addresses that from education, from the cradle to the grave. It talks about that whole thing. Another really good book to read when you're talking CRT is Fault Lines by Vodou Bako, right? Really good book. It talks about CRT in religion, in churches, and it gives you a very good idea of what Larry was saying earlier. Where are the churches? Where are the faithful people? Well, the faithful people don't want to be canceled because, you know, they depend on the donations. They depend on being popular. When churches have more to do about being business entities than about being faith-building entities, you know, we got some structural problems. My biggest concern with the CRT thing is that it doesn't become a new shiny distraction and what we need to be fighting for as American citizens. We have got to learn to get along. You know, I know it sounds trite, I know it sounds very simplistic, but man, oh man, could we use a Ronald Reagan speech right in through here? Can we not just use Ronald Reagan sitting in the Oval Office with the fire crackling behind him saying, listen, folks, we've gone too far. Can we rein it in? You know, and get back to being good citizens, get back to helping one another. There was once upon a time where you could be a Republican or a Democrat, and you could be as red or as blue as you chose to be, but red, white, and blue was the color for everybody. We were all concerned about being good Americans, and we would not sacrifice that for political gains on either side. Well, as I'm sure many of us are well aware, that baby has been thrown out with the bathwater. They burnt the house down and probably foreclosed on the two houses on either side. When it comes to being a good American, making sure that our children are educated in a way that teaches them that America is the greatest country this world has ever known, and that we live under the blessing of Almighty God. When you don't teach that, and you teach that America is an inherently racist nation, when you teach about you know, neo-segregation and all of these very nuanced topics to very small children, and spirit murdering and all of these weirdo things, you know, even as an adult, I don't want to wrap my mind around it. But can you imagine being a kid and you come in from gym class and your teacher is going, well, today we're going to talk about, you know, structural inequity, and you're going, oh, Jesus, not again. I think parents are the solution to that. I think community is the solution to that. I know for certain family is the solution to that. And as long as we continue to build strong, faithful families, America's going to be okay. We just can't get distracted by the infomercial of, look at this new shiny hate thing. Okay, everybody freak out, right? That's kind of where we are with this CRT thing at this moment.
COVID. But anyway, I digress.
Jan line.
Just to add my 2 cents, my last 2 cents about CRT, you know, it's an attack on American values. It's an attack on our Constitution and how our country was founded by our forefathers. White people are not born racist. The DNA and the structure of DNA for white people does not encompass racism. Just like Blacks are not born oppressed just by the color of our skin. One doesn't necessarily mean the same as the other. We've really got to hold on to, and I like what you said, Sis Nicole, about family values. That's the root of what we need to be holding on to, and really making sure that we're building strong children, strong communities, that's going to bind us together. We have more in common than not.
Absolutely. Mhm.
We share more commonalities across our lives and the color of our skin than we do differences. I tell my daughter all the time, there are no excuses. You can do just as much as Todd Johnson can do in your classroom, who's your white counterpart, or the young lady who's Caucasian. You can achieve the same as what, just because she's white, she's not more privileged than you.
Mhm.
You have to study hard. You have to work hard for what you want.
Mhm.
You have to do your homework. You've got to apply for lots of scholarships to go to that UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina. You
Come
know,
on now.
yeah, look, so,
Mhm.
you know, opportunities are there for all of us. And people toss around the word equity and equality. All of that is coming out in the wash of CRT, you know. But if we're all given the same opportunities to work hard, to strive, you know, I don't have nothing against Oprah and her billions, or Bezos can go to space with his billions. Okay, I applaud him. He got all that money. He can do that. Capitalism is a great thing in this country.
Yes,
We
it
all
is.
can aspire to get there if that's God's will for us to be billionaires. You probably don't want me to be a billionaire because I'll spin it up too fast. I'll be buying all kind of Tory Burch shoes and all that. He knows how to bless people with what they need. Keep me in my lane. But you know, we all have opportunities in our lives that we're presented, and we have to make the best of those opportunities and not make excuses about why I don't have it, but you have it, and I don't have it because I'm Black, and you have it because you're white. We cannot go down those roads and with that kind of thinking. Let's all strive to do what we're, you know, willed to have by God, and live another day to love each other. That's the commandment. Love each other.
Amen. 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 Mhm.
Larry, did you have any final words?
A few months ago, a great American passed. And I studied him in college, and I studied him in education, Colin Powell. Colin Powell's mother said, "You can be whatever you want to be, and I'll support you." He was raised by a single mother. I studied him because he was an example of resilience theory that says wherever you are, there might be one person who succeeds because they can, even though he grew up in the Southern Bronx in poverty, he succeeded in this country and he made something of himself. There are a couple of characteristics of resilience theory. When you go to your schools, are they encouraging resilience theory? That kids know that have a locus of control, that you're not going to beat up that person because he looked at you funny. You have control of that behavior. You are in command. I like to think my mother, of blessed memory, had done that with me, and I bless her for helping me be successful in life. And I hope that all of you do your best to make sure that our kids of all colors also succeed in the same way.
All right, I do a few final thoughts. I appreciate everybody bearing with me. So I took a couple quick little notes as everybody was speaking, just kind of encapsulate what I wanted to say. So one thing is identity politics. A lot of people get caught up with it. You know, I grew up in a trailer park. I, grew up dirt poor. I lived in many houses that had mice running around, cockroaches. It's not fun. But people like to assume, oh, you're white, so you're this. Oh, you're Jewish, so you're this. I get that one even more than the white one. So we have to get rid of those assumptions based on identity. That's ridiculous. We also have to get rid of tribalism. Just because we're red, we're Republicans, doesn't mean we can't criticize another Republican. I do not subscribe to Reagan's 11th commandment, thou shalt not criticize another Republican. Sometimes people are wrong and it's okay to call them out. We have to stop playing those games. Yes, we all believe in certain things, but we have to get rid of those purity tests. Purity tests are they've destroyed the left as it was. There was a point once upon a time where there was a very small divide between the right and the left. There was a lot more than people. There was a lot more of what people agreed on than what they disagreed on. Abortion, safe, legal, rare was a common middle ground. They used to agree on Israel. They used to agree on patriotism, strong military. There was a lot of things, strong church, that used to be common. Now it isn't. Now there's so many things. If you don't check all of the boxes, you're not accepted on the left. And the right's doing a lot of the same things. And it's ridiculous. We have to understand nuance. We have to understand that not everybody's going to reflect us 100%. And we can pick and choose who we're going to back. And that's okay. Understand the nuance, get rid of the purity tests, stop making assumptions, and stop playing identity politics. That's how we have to move forward as Americans, not just conservatives, but I think that's the best way to overcome critical race theory and any of this other BS propaganda they're trying to throw at us, if you will. We all on the same page?
Yes, I concur.
We are, absolutely.
I appreciate everybody joining me tonight. This was the first event like this I've hosted, and hopefully I can do some more in the future. I definitely have some great ideas, I think, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Have a good
For
night.
having me,
Night.
Josh.
Bye,
Bye.
Love.
Bye.